My sister laughed in my face at her MBA graduation, in front of everyone, because I was working as a waitress. But 5 minutes later, the dean revealed something that made her turn pale as a ghost. Stay with me through this story, and if it makes you feel something, whether it's anger, pride, or hope, don't forget to share it with someone who needs to hear it. I'm Natalie Brooks, 25 years old, and yes, I work as a waitress at a small diner in our town. People see the uniform, the notepad in my hand, the tired smile at the end of a shift, and they think they know my life. They think they can sum me up in one glance. My sister, Vanessa, has always been one of those people. Vanessa is 3 years older than me, and in our parents' eyes, she's always been the golden child. She just graduated from one of the most prestigious MBA programs in the country. She's smart, ambitious, and loves to make sure everyone knows it. She's also the kind of person who sees someone else's quiet life as something to mock. Her graduation day was supposed to be about celebrating her. I didn't plan on stealing any spotlight. I came straight from my lunch shift, still in my uniform, because I wanted to be there on time. I sat in the back row, hoping no one would notice me. But Vanessa noticed. She always does. When it was her turn to give her speech, she thanked her professors, her classmates, her parents, and then she looked right at me. "And thanks to my little sister Natalie," she said with that smug smile of hers, "for showing me what not to do in life. No matter where you start, you don't have to end up taking people's orders forever." The crowd chuckled. A few people outright laughed. My cheeks burned, but I didn't say a word. I just smiled faintly, the same way I do when a rude customer tries to get under my skin at the diner. Inside, though, it hurt. Not because she said it. She's been saying things like that my whole life, but because it was in front of a room full of strangers. She had no idea that her words wouldn't age well. No idea that someone in that very room knew a truth about me she didn't. And just a few minutes later, that truth would come out in a way neither of us expected. I sat quietly as the ceremony wrapped up, listening to the polite applause and the rustle of programs being folded. Vanessa stood tall, waving to people, proud and radiant. She had no clue her moment of power was about to slip away. When the dean walked toward us, smiling directly at me, I knew the tables were about to turn. Growing up, my sister Vanessa never missed a chance to remind me I wasn't on her level. If she got an A, she'd wave the paper in my face. If I got a B, she'd smirk and say, "Well, some people just aren't meant for big things." Even at family dinners, she'd somehow turn the conversation into a competition, one I never agreed to play. Our parents didn't exactly help. They adored Vanessa's grades, her charm, the way she could impress teachers and relatives without trying. When she said she wanted to go to a prestigious business school, they supported her every step of the way. But when I talked about wanting to go to college, they were quick to be realistic. "Not everyone needs a degree, Natalie," my dad would say. "You're great with people. You do well in hospitality. Something safe, you know?" At first, I thought they were just being practical. But over time, I realized it wasn't practicality. It was a quiet dismissal. They didn't believe I could achieve more, and maybe they didn't think I deserved to. By the time I was 16, I'd stopped trying to compete with Vanessa in the ways she valued. I got my first job bussing tables at a small cafe after school, and I loved the independence. I worked weekends, evenings, even holidays. While Vanessa was out with friends or attending debate club, I was counting tips and wiping down counters. But I didn't just work. I took night classes at the community center, learning everything from accounting basics to marketing strategy. I didn't tell my family about it. They wouldn't have understood why a waitress was studying business. I just kept going one class after another, squeezing them in between shifts. Vanessa's world was full of shiny trophies, perfect report cards, and framed certificates. Mine was built on grit, late nights studying at the kitchen table after a 12-hour shift, saving every extra dollar in a jar I kept hidden in my closet. She had the image of success. I had the habit of hard work. Every time Vanessa came home from college during breaks, she'd ask about my little job, with that fake sweetness that always felt like a slap. She'd tell me about networking events, professors who praised her, and summer internships at big companies. I'd just nod and smile, letting her believe she was far ahead of me. I learned early on that I didn't need to announce my progress. I didn't need anyone's applause. I just needed to keep moving forward, quietly building a life she couldn't imagine. And while Vanessa was crafting her perfect image, I was creating something much more powerful, something real. Back then, she thought she was winning, but she didn't see the race I was actually running, and she definitely didn't see how far ahead I'd be when the finish line finally appeared. By the time I rushed out of the diner, my feet were aching and my hair smelled faintly of coffee. I had planned to be early for Vanessa's graduation, but a last-minute rush of customers kept me on the floor 30 minutes past my shift. I didn't even have time to change. My black waitress uniform and apron were the only things I had on me, so I decided to go as I was. The campus was buzzing with excitement when I arrived. Families posed for pictures, students in caps and gowns hugged each other, and proud parents carried bouquets of flowers. I slipped in quietly, holding a small gift bag I'd picked up for Vanessa a week earlier. I found an empty seat in the back row of the auditorium, hoping I could blend in and not draw any attention to myself. The stage was decorated with banners, and the graduates sat in neat rows up front. I spotted Vanessa immediately. Perfect posture, perfect hair, that perfect smile she'd practiced since she was 12. She looked around the crowd, and when her eyes landed on me, the corner of her mouth twitched upward. It wasn't a warm smile. It was that little smirk I knew too well, the one that meant she'd already thought of a way to turn my presence into a punchline. The ceremony went on for a while. Speeches from faculty, students being called up one by one to receive their degrees. I clapped along with everyone else, feeling the occasional glance from nearby parents, probably wondering why someone in a waitress uniform was sitting there. I kept my chin up, even though I wished I could disappear. Then it was Vanessa's turn to give her speech. She stepped up to the podium, radiating confidence. Her voice carried easily through the hall as she thanked the university, her classmates, her professors, and of course our parents. She talked about perseverance, ambition, and chasing dreams. And then, with a casual glance toward the back, she said, "And thanks to my little sister Natalie, for showing me that no matter where you start, you don't have to end up taking people's orders for life." The room reacted instantly. A ripple of chuckles spread through the audience. Some laughed openly, others just smiled awkwardly, but they all looked in my direction. I could feel the heat rising in my face, my hands tightening around the gift bag in my lap. For a second, I wanted to walk out, but instead I stayed still, forcing a small, polite smile. If she thought she could embarrass me into reacting, she was wrong. I'd learned a long time ago that silence can be stronger than any comeback. She moved on with her speech as if nothing had happened, but I knew she'd gotten exactly the reaction she wanted, at least for now. What she didn't realize was that her moment of triumph was only going to last a few more minutes. When the ceremony ended, I waited for most of the crowd to stand before making my way toward the exit. I figured I could hand Vanessa her gift, congratulate her quickly, and slip out without dragging things on. But she spotted me before I could leave. She was in the middle of a group, professors, classmates, and a few friends I recognized from social media. Everyone looked impressed, hanging on her every word. As I approached, she turned her head slightly, a glint of mischief in her eyes. "Oh, Natalie," she called out, loud enough for the whole group to hear. "I hope you got some inspiration today. Who knows, maybe one day you'll trade that apron for a diploma." A few people chuckled. One of her friends glanced at my uniform and quickly looked away, trying not to stare. I forced a smile, pretending her jab rolled right off me. This wasn't new. Vanessa had always performed her insults like they were comedy. Before I could say anything, a tall man with silver hair and a warm, commanding presence walked toward us. His black suit was sharp, and he moved like someone who belonged everywhere. The small group parted as he approached. "Miss Brooks," he said with a friendly nod in my direction. For a second, I thought he was talking to Vanessa, but then he stepped right past her and stopped in front of me. "It's good to see you here," he said with genuine warmth. "We've missed you in class these past few weeks." The air shifted instantly. A few people looked from him to me, confusion spreading across their faces. Vanessa's confident smile faltered just slightly. Dr. Robert Hayes, dean of the business school, extended his hand to me. "Professor Brooks," he said clearly, "it's always a pleasure. I hope you'll be joining us again for the next semester's strategy program." The word professor hung in the air like a sudden gust of wind that blew everyone's expressions wide open. Someone in the group blinked and whispered, "Professor?" to the person next to them. Vanessa's smirk was gone. Her lips were pressed into a thin, pale line, and her eyes darted between me and the dean as if trying to piece together a puzzle she didn't know existed. I shook his hand, matching his warmth. "Thank you, Dr. Hayes. I'm looking forward to it," I said. My voice was calm, steady, nothing dramatic, just matter of fact. Around us, the laughter from moments earlier had evaporated. Vanessa's friends shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to say something or stay silent. Even the professors standing nearby looked mildly surprised. The dean gave me a final smile before excusing himself to greet another group. And just like that, the balance in the room had shifted. I didn't need to defend myself. Truth had done it for me. 2 years earlier, my life had looked very different from the way Vanessa imagined it. Back then, I was still working long shifts at the diner, saving every spare dollar. What she didn't know was that in between refilling coffee cups and delivering plates, I was building something bigger. One evening, while scrolling through my phone during a short break, I came across an ad for a national entrepreneurship contest. The prize was a full scholarship for an MBA program, plus mentorship from leading business professionals. It sounded impossible for someone like me, but something in me decided to try. I spent weeks working on my pitch after hours, using my tiny apartment as my brainstorming lab. The day I submitted my idea, I didn't expect much. But a month later, I got the email. Out of thousands of applicants, I had won. The scholarship covered tuition for an online MBA program at a highly ranked university. I didn't tell my family. I didn't even tell my closest friends. Years of Vanessa's snide comments had taught me that some victories are best kept private until they're undeniable. So, while she was bragging about her internship opportunities, I was logging into virtual lectures after closing shifts, writing case studies at 2 a.m., and video conferencing with professors on my days off. It wasn't easy. There were nights I thought I wouldn't make it through. But I pushed class by class, project by project. And a year and a half later, before Vanessa even started her final MBA year, I completed mine. Summa cum laude. They held a ceremony for graduates, but I didn't attend. I didn't need the stage or the applause. My degree was mailed to me in a simple cardboard envelope, which I opened quietly at my kitchen table. I hung it on the wall, not where visitors could see it, but where I'd pass by it every morning. Shortly after, one of my professors, impressed by my final capstone project, recommended me for a part-time teaching position in the university's Advanced Business Strategy department. I accepted, but I taught under my professional name, Natalie Gray, to keep my personal and professional worlds separate. At the same time, I launched a small consulting firm, also under the Gray name. It started with a few clients, but word spread quickly. Within a year, I was advising companies on strategic growth, mergers, and market positioning. My client list included startups and mid-sized corporations, businesses Vanessa would have given anything to work for. And yet she never knew. I didn't post about it online. I didn't mention it during family gathering. I let her keep believing the version of me she'd always seen, the girl in the apron, taking orders and scraping by. Because one day, I knew the truth would come out on its own. And when it did, it would speak louder than any defense I could ever give. The dean didn't just stop at calling me Professor Brooks. He lingered with the group, turning his attention to the people around Vanessa. You know, he said, smiling at me, Natalie has been a tremendous asset to our program. Some of our top graduates have come through her mentorship. In fact, a few of them went on to win national competitions, even beating out other students from our own MBA cohort. A couple of Vanessa's friends glanced at her immediately, recognizing the implication. One of them even raised their eyebrows slightly, as if piecing together a private joke they'd missed until now. I stayed still, letting his words sink into the air. Vanessa's face was composed, but I could see the faint tension in her jaw. Oh, of course, she said quickly, her voice pitched just a little too high. I knew all about that. She laughed softly, but the sound was thin, forced. Natalie's always been, doing her own thing. Her tone was meant to sound casual, but I could hear the cracks in it. She was scrambling to keep her balance in front of her professors and friends, the same way a politician tries to smile through a bad headline. Our parents were standing a few feet away, watching the exchange. I'd never seen them look so still. My mother's mouth was slightly open, like she was about to say something but couldn't find the words. My father's brow was furrowed in confusion, as if the scene in front of him didn't quite match the family narrative he'd believed for years. The dean continued warmly, clearly oblivious to the quiet storm building between us. Her approach to strategy is exceptional, he said. She's got that rare combination of practical experience and theoretical knowledge. We're lucky to have her teaching here. I smiled and nodded, meeting his eyes. Thank you, Dr. Hayes. That means a lot. And that was it. I didn't gloat. I didn't try to twist the knife. I didn't even look at Vanessa when I said it. I just accepted his praise with calm certainty, then excused myself politely. As I walked away, I could feel the ripple my presence had left behind. Conversations had shifted. People were murmuring in low tones, their curious glances darting toward Vanessa. Her friends were no longer just admiring her success. They were reassessing the quiet sister she had spent years belittling. By the time I reached the far end of the hall, I knew that nothing I could have planned would have been more effective than what had just happened. I hadn't raised my voice, I hadn't exposed her cruelty, and I hadn't needed to defend myself. The truth had done all the work, and now Vanessa would have to live with it. That evening, our family gathered for a celebratory dinner at a nice restaurant downtown. The plan had been made weeks ago, Vanessa's big graduation dinner, complete with champagne, flowers, and our parents beaming with pride. But the energy around the table felt off. Vanessa sat across from me, picking at her bread roll more than eating it. She avoided eye contact, her usual bright smile replaced with a tight, unreadable expression. Our parents, meanwhile, were unusually quiet at first, but eventually my mother leaned forward. Natalie, she began carefully, why didn't you ever tell us about, any of this? The teaching, the business, the degree. My father chimed in, his voice carrying that mix of confusion and something else, maybe guilt. "You've been doing all this behind our backs? Why? We're your family." I set my fork down gently, making sure my voice stayed steady. "Because I wanted to be valued for who I am, not just for what I've achieved," I said. Every time I tried to do something, it was compared to Vanessa. I didn't want my life measured next to hers. I wanted it to stand on its own. My mother blinked, as if she hadn't considered that before. My father's gaze shifted to his plate. Across the table, Vanessa let out a sharp laugh, not amused but bitter. "Oh, please," she said, finally looking at me. "You just didn't say anything because you wanted to pull some dramatic reveal and steal my spotlight. And what better day to do it than my graduation?" Her tone was sharp enough to cut through the quiet clink of silverware in the background. A couple of nearby tables even glanced over. I kept my voice calm, though I could feel her anger pressing against me like a wave. "Vanessa, I didn't choose when the dean decided to say something. I came here to support you, not to compete with you." "Support me?" she shot back. "You sat there in your uniform, acting all humble, while knowing you were going to make me look like a fool in front of everyone." I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to defend myself, to point out all the years she'd put me down, but I knew it would only feed her resentment. Instead, I picked up my water glass, took a sip, and said simply, "If you feel like my success makes you look bad, that's not my fault." The table went silent again. My parents exchanged a quick glance, but neither of them stepped in. Vanessa turned her attention to her plate, stabbing at her salad with quick, irritated motion. The rest of the meal passed in awkward small talk, but the tension never lifted. I could feel it sitting heavy in the air between us, a reminder that the balance in our family had shifted, and nothing would be quite the same again. About a month after Vanessa's graduation, I was in the middle of reviewing candidate files for a new corporate project my consulting firm had taken on. It was a big contract, one that involved advising a well-known company on restructuring their leadership team. As the lead consultant, part of my role was to assess applicants for key positions. I was halfway through a stack of resumes when I froze. The name staring back at me was impossible to miss: Vanessa Brooks. For a moment, I just sat there staring at it. Her qualifications were strong on paper: good schools, a handful of internships, and of course, the fresh MBA. But there were also notes from previous employers and professors that told a different story. Words like independent to a fault and difficulty collaborating popped up more than once. In my line of work, that was a red flag, especially for a role that required team leadership. I took a deep breath and reminded myself why I was here. This wasn't about me and Vanessa. This was about finding the right fit for my client's needs. If she was the best candidate, I'd say so. But if she wasn't, I wouldn't twist the rules just to give her a pass. The interview process was anonymous on my end. She wouldn't know I was behind the evaluation. Her interview was technically strong. She spoke with confidence and had all the right buzzwords. But when the team-based scenario came up, I saw exactly what those past evaluations had hinted at. She dominated the conversation, dismissed other suggestions, and insisted her approach was clearly the best, without acknowledging feedback. When I submitted my notes to the hiring committee, I kept them professional: excellent academic background, strong presentation skills, but limited adaptability and poor collaboration in group settings. It was honest and fair, exactly how I'd treat any candidate. A week later, the decision came down. Vanessa didn't get the role. The position went to another candidate who had scored higher in teamwork and adaptability. I wouldn't have thought much more about it, except word travels fast in corporate circles. A colleague mentioned in passing that someone had told Vanessa the company passed on her because she struggled to work well with others. I could imagine how that must have hit her, especially after years of believing she was destined to lead. I didn't gloat. I didn't send her a message or drop hints. She still didn't know I'd been part of the process at all. But I did hear, through the family grapevine, that she was taking some time to figure things out. In the business world, reputations can shift quickly. Vanessa had built hers on ambition and individual achievement, but without the ability to work with people, doors start to close. And this time, no amount of charm or bragging could open them again. Life moved forward, but the gap between Vanessa and me began to widen in ways no one could ignore. I didn't change my behavior. I still kept my work life and personal life separate, still avoided talking about my accomplishments unless someone directly asked. But my success had a way of speaking for itself. Clients kept coming in, my consulting business continued to grow, and the university offered me more teaching hours. I started traveling for conferences, meeting other professionals, and building a network that stretched far beyond our small town. My schedule was full, my work fulfilling, and my circle of friends supportive and uplifting. Meanwhile, Vanessa's career never seemed to find stable ground. After the job rejection, she bounced between short-term roles and freelance gigs, but nothing stuck. At first, she still had friends who cheered her on, but I noticed the way their tone shifted over time. People began to pick up on her habit of putting others down to make herself look better. It wasn't just toward me, it was anyone she saw as competition. Family gatherings became quieter for her. The aunts and uncles who once showered her with praise started asking more questions about my travels, my work, and my students. I always answered modestly, but the change in attention was impossible to miss. Vanessa didn't handle it well. She became more withdrawn, showing up to fewer events, and when she did, she carried an edge in her voice, like she was bracing herself for some invisible blow. I didn't provoke her. I didn't remind her of the dean's introduction or the job she'd lost. I didn't need to. The contrast between us grew naturally. I had built my life on steady effort, quiet discipline, and respect for the people I worked with. She had built hers on image, competition, and the belief that she was untouchable. And now, everyone was starting to see the difference. It wasn't that I wanted to see her fail. I never wished that for her. But there was a strange sense of balance in watching the truth reveal itself over time. The same arrogance she once aimed at me was now costing her opportunities, while my humility and persistence were opening doors I hadn't even knocked on yet. One afternoon, I ran into an old family friend at a coffee shop. We chatted for a few minutes, and before leaving, she said, "You know, Natalie, I think people are finally realizing who you really are, and who Vanessa really is." I just smiled, thanked her, and went back to my work. That was the thing about quiet revenge. It didn't require speeches, drama, or public takedown. It was simply letting life play out, knowing that the truth has a way of shining through. And in my case, it was shining brighter than I ever needed to announce. Looking back, I realized that the sweetest kind of revenge isn't the kind you plan with dramatic speeches or grand reveal. It's the quiet kind, the kind where you don't have to raise your voice, prove your worth to anyone, or even defend yourself. You just keep living your life, and eventually, the truth makes its own way to the surface. Vanessa's downfall didn't come because I exposed her or humiliated her in front of the world. It came from the very traits she had always worn like badges: her arrogance, her inability to work with others, her need to be the center of attention. Those things left unchecked did the work for me. All I had to do was stay steady on my own path. There's a certain peace that comes from knowing you didn't have to lie or cheat to get ahead. I never twisted the truth to make myself look better, never sabotaged her opportunities, and never celebrated when things went wrong for her. I didn't have to. Her choices shaped her reality, just as mine shaped mine. Sometimes I wonder if she'll ever see it that way. Maybe she'll realize that the sister she spent years belittling was never her competition, only her mirror, reflecting what she didn't want to face. Or maybe she'll keep telling herself a version of the story where she's the victim and I'm the villain. Either way, it doesn't change where I stand. Because the truth is, I'm not interested in her opinion anymore. I'm interested in the work I do, the students I mentor, the clients I help succeed. I'm interested in the life I've built for myself, one that isn't defined by sibling rivalry or the approval of people who once underestimated. That morning, as I got ready for another day at the university, I caught sight of my degree hanging on the wall. I thought about how different my journey had been from Vanessa's. Less glitter, fewer spotlights, but so much more substance. It made me smile. I walked onto campus with my usual coffee in hand, the crisp air filling my lungs. Students were already gathering outside the building, talking in clusters, their energy buzzing in the early light. As I stepped into my classroom, I set my bag down, turned on the projector, and glanced at the empty chairs waiting to be filled. This was my space, my world, built on late nights, relentless effort, and the quiet refusal to let anyone else define me. When the first students began filing in, I greeted them with a calm, steady confidence. Whatever had happened with Vanessa belonged to the past now. The present was here, in this room, where I belonged, not by accident, not by chance, but because I'd earned it. And as I began the lesson, I felt nothing but fulfillment. Unshaken. What's your take? Was Natalie right to let her success speak for itself, or should she have confronted Vanessa directly? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if you enjoy stories like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next one.